scheduled board meeting of the South Tahoe PUD. Could everyone please stand and join me in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I understand we do have a couple of people here that want to make comments on non-agenda items. Robert, you want to go first?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Robert Spinato, and I'd like to thank the board for letting me address the board today on a water matter that we're having at the Tahoe Keys Marina, and just to try and enlighten the board a little bit about the situation that's going on there. We've got 25 employees that are out of work at the Fresh Catch because there's no water there. We've got 12 residents that can't live in their living quarters there, 3 units that we rent out there. They can't live there at this point in time. We've got 239 slip holders that don't have proper restroom facilities. We brought in some porta potties, but they don't have the showers that they should have. And we've got about 6 other tenants like Ben Fagan and Mike Ambler and a few other locals that are also impacted by this. So it's a huge impact on our community, our little community at the Tahoe Keys Marina. And the backstory is that we did pay the water bill, just like we've paid our public utility sewer bills for the last 9 years, just like we've paid over almost $2 million in taxes in the last 9 years, and all our other vendors that we've paid in the community. So we do pay our bills, and in fact we paid this bill. And what happened was that we did some trade on the ramp in 2009 in the spring. TKPOA said, hey, can we use your ramp for cutting your weeds? We won't charge you for cutting the weeds, you don't charge us for the ramp. I said fine. And I was personally involved in this. So this isn't hearsay, this is factual, which I'll end up testifying to in court. So we paid the bill. We gave maybe $75,000. They charged us 3 years for water quality. And we said, hey, you made a mistake and you charged us for using the ramp, for water quality, and you used our ramp, and it was a trade. So can you put it towards water usage? And they said, no, we've already allocated it to water quality. And then our attorney gave them a check for $10,000, Bob Henderson, to go to water quality, which they applied, or water usage, which they applied to water quality again. So we've paid them $85,000 that they applied all to water quality. And we explained it to them. We sent them certified letters. We've pleaded with them not to turn off our water at least a half a dozen times in the last 30 days and asked them to get in a room with us to settle this matter, and they've ignored us. And they've turned off the water, which I believe you guys have been gracious enough to provide to them when they had a problem with contamination of their wells. So they didn't extend the same, olive branch to us. And like I say, it's more of an impact on the employees, the tenants, more so than, it's an impact to my owner without a doubt, but it's more of a daily impact. He's in Florida right now. So the daily impact to the people that live there, it's massive. And you guys know we pay our bills. You can go back and look at your files. We've been paying you guys for 9 years. And we even offered to put up a bond until we could get through this matter. And they refused that. So that's kind of where we're at today. We're trying to get through it, but I wanted you guys to know what the situation was, because I believe they're getting water from you guys.
Not currently, no.
Oh, not currently? They're back on their own wells?
That's correct.
Okay.
The Lucan's Water Company's on our wells.
Okay. Somebody called me today, and that's why I'm in front of you guys right now. They said that they were getting water, so I apologize for that I misspoke. But regardless, it's pretty bad, is all I can tell you. So that's the story, and we're just trying to get through it for the people that live there.
Well, we appreciate that, Robert, but we are completely separate.
I got it now. I understand. So I apologize if I'm wasting your time, but like I said, somebody told me you guys were providing water.
That was my fault.
And we have been discussing this issue because everybody in town has.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
but there's a little clarity to it, to where at least we did pay our bill, and they allocated it incorrectly. So thank you again for your time and letting me speak today.
All right, thank you. Melanie, you said there was one other, oh, yes.
I guess there's more than.
So I'm sorry, was there?
There was 2 other people.
Okay. Okay, yeah, well, let's finish off on the subject here first, okay? All right.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm an employee of the Fresh Catch and have been for a while. A lot of us have been impacted by this water outage. To me, it seems ridiculous because the people that are turning the water off are not affected by this. The employees of the Fresh Catch are affected by this. We have been displaced. Some of us are homeless. That's beside the point. To me, this seems like a personal vendetta. And I'm here today as a representative of the Fresh Catch restaurant and their employees to ask that this matter be resolved as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And there was someone else?
Hi, I'm Brennan Lockme. I'm a resident at the marina. I rent an apartment there. Luckily enough for me, my sister lives down the road. I'm able to shower and do all that kind of stuff down there. But I think one of the main things that should be addressed is the fact that there's no water to the fire hydrants that are there, and that's a big thing, especially with 200 some odd slip holders. If there's a fire there, the whole place will go up, and I think that should be addressed, to the city and to anybody that can be an impact of that towards resolving that matter. Apparently, it's all the same line that feeds the hydrants as well as the marina itself. So I don't know what you guys can do, but I know if you talk amongst yourselves with the people that you have contacts with, maybe some resolution can come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else on this subject? Sure.
In here at any point. I'm not entirely sure what's going on. I appreciate you guys taking the time on one of the residents as well. Hi, Kelly. Kelly's known my family. We've been here since 1972. I've got my 2-year-old and my 13-year-old. I think the hardest part for me right now is the fact that, excuse me, my 2-year-old was apparently having issues at daycare for the first time 2 days ago. And so we are now getting ready to go to psychologists, and they think she's having displacement issues because she's been at the marina for the last year and a half. That's hard. I understand this may not be the board. Unfortunately, that's the case. You guys aren't supplying the water to Tahoe Keys Homeowners Association. They're on their own well. I think I had my hopes up that maybe you folks were. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know, one side or the other. I know that I've heard Robert's side. It makes total sense. I know that I talked to Kurt briefly, and he was completely unsympathetic to any situation. Again, sorry I'm emotional, but I appreciate you guys listening. And the family's displaced, but luckily my mom still has her place, and we actually have a place to be. But at the same time, I think we'd all like to be at our home. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And then also just to let you guys know, because this is not on the agenda, the Brown Act forbids us to have a discussion or consideration on this. So I just want to let you know. Yeah. That's we only do that in emergency situations, and they've got I think 3 out of their 4 wells are running right now. Is that right?
Well, I think all 3 are available.
Or all 3 are available.
Yeah, and they've got a PC treatment on one of them, so that's why. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Next.
Hi, I'm Wanda Stanley, and I am the GIS specialist here. I've been an employee here at the district for 30 years, and for the last 25 years, I've been shop steward and acting chief, representing the membership of Stationary Engineers Local 39. And I pride myself in that we have continued a harmonious relationship and mutual respect for district staff, its management, and the board of directors. And I personally wanted to thank you from the membership and myself for our last contract. This is my last negotiations, and I'm very proud of that. And I wasn't going to do this. But anyway, thank you very, very much. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for all the years you've worked here.
I'm still scared of her.
Okay, do we have any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar? And it looks like at this time we do have item 4D, that long list of numbers has a correction. You guys should each have a copy of that, I think. So with this, is there any other corrections to the consent calendar other than this one? Hearing none, how about we have a motion?
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
That passes 4-0. Thank you. All right. ENS has a report for us. And gentlemen, don't feel obligated to sit through our whole meeting unless you just find this fascinating. Okay.
Thank you. Usually I say thank you for the introduction, but your comment, you might learn something. That's great. I hope I don't let you down. Thank you for letting us come today. We're going to tag team, David French and I. I'm going to do a general update for you, and David's going to talk about some of the specific issues that we've been engaged in based on the district's priorities and goals in Washington. So let's go this way. So there's three key issues of concern that we sort of thought about that would be, I think, good for grounding. And in the course of the presentation, if anybody has any questions, please interrupt us. First, I want to go over the legislative and regulatory outlook, if you will. The second is, as I mentioned, David will give you the update on specific issues that we are doing work for on behalf of the district. And then finally, we'll do a little crystal ball gazing on what's going to happen in the next 6-8 months' time in this session of Congress. Okay, so I think the best way to summarize what's going on is this sign that says disruption ahead. We've heard about, what in the news, you've seen the campaign with the president's priorities and how he wants to shake up Washington, drain the swamp of all the sort of instilled nature of Washington that's been sort of the bane of everybody's existence. But when you think about disruption, keep in mind that a lot of things are happening underneath all the emotional and theatrical activities that are going on in Washington that you read about. And we can put those in the context of about four key areas of interest: the budget, infrastructure policy, and then, of course, regulatory reform. And then I want to also talk about appointments, retirements within the federal bureaucracy, because that has an impact upon where things may head. So first, the budget. The appropriations process is moving along. Some of you may be aware that the president's budget that was released called for significant cuts across the domestic side of the budget at the federal level. By example, EPA was going to be cut by 33%. The good news for us is the programs that the district really is concerned about, and that's infrastructure. the Trump administration is strongly on board in supporting infrastructure funding, and that is mirrored in the Congress also. The appropriations process is on a fast-forward level right now. The House of Representatives, at the committee level, they've approved all the spending bills. In the Senate, they're moving ahead to move all the spending bills through the committee. And what we have seen on both sides of Congress, in the House and Senate, is a rejection of the administration's dramatic budget request cuts. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be budget requests, but they're tempered. For example, EPA spending is being cut by about 7%. At the Department of the Interior, that funds a lot of the water recycling, drought efforts, water conservation efforts, metering, what have you, the Congress, in both the House and the Senate on the appropriations side, have given firm support for those programs by funding them at current levels. So, we always go through this guessing game, will there be a budget or won't there be a budget? And sometime between October 1 and December, we end up with either a continuing resolution or some kind of a massive agreement to fund the federal government. That's going to happen again, and I think what's going to happen in this budget cycle is essentially current year spending on all the programs that the district cares about. One of the things that will drive the budget process is a budget resolution. Now, the House is acting today on, or the House Committee is on Budget is acting on a budget resolution today that will put in place, if it were to be enacted into law, put in place cuts on mandatory spending. That's entitlement spending, Medicare, Medicaid, things of that sort. They don't have the votes in the House for this budget resolution. The conservatives would like even deeper cuts. The moderates would like less cuts. And the centrists in general are saying, we just want to get a budget resolution. So there's no real agreement, and it's unclear whether the budget will get through. The reason that's important is to the next bullet, tax reform. So we're all waiting for the Trump administration proposal on how to reform the tax code. Put tax cuts in, get rid of loopholes, what have you. The challenge that we face is without a budget resolution, and this gets into the arcane activities of Washington, if you don't have a budget resolution, you don't have the mechanisms to actually do tax reform. It's very complicated, but take that sort of a factual statement. One of the things that comes out of that is that we might see tax cuts rather than tax reform, and they'll figure out a way to do some offsets in tax cuts so that you can literally see reductions in personal and corporate rates. One of the ways they're looking at doing that is by limiting the deductibility of state and local taxes, otherwise known as SALT, not to be confused with nuclear disarmament. One of the things that's going on is that if they were to seriously entertain limiting or eliminating the deductibility of local taxes, you could get into this situation where they then move on to eliminating tax-exempt financing at the state and local level. Our perspective right now is that first, when you look at California, New York, Pennsylvania, sort of the big states population-wise, they all have high tax rates for local and state level financing. So there are a lot of members in Congress that make up those example of delegations, so the votes probably aren't there to get rid of state and local tax deductibility. Similarly, on the availability of tax-exempt financing for infrastructure projects, schools, what have you, there's over 190 members in the House of Representatives that have signed a letter to the Ways and Means Committee, that's the tax writing committee in the House, saying we oppose the elimination of tax-exempt financing because it's the one proven method for local governments and state governments to finance their infrastructure needs. So at the end of the day, I think what we're going to see is a circumstance where the tax reform effort falls by the wayside and we see simple tax cuts. And the corporate tax rates get dropped somewhat, and then the personal income tax rates get dropped a little bit. And that's where I think the Congress ends up. So the issues that you might be concerned about from a day-to-day basis of financing projects will remain the same. So that's where we are on the budget and the appropriations process. On infrastructure policy, that's the big issue, right? Healthcare has apparently imploded but things change every day. We'll see what happens next week when the Senate tries to vote to repeal the healthcare law. The assumption is the votes aren't there. So the next issue that gets taken up, if you agree that tax reform is sort of out there and nobody knows how they're going to deal with that, is infrastructure. The administration has made it a hallmark. They want to rebuild America. If there's one issue in Congress that is literally a bipartisan issue of support, it's infrastructure. And what we see happening right now are two things I want to bring to your attention. Number one, when the administration talks about infrastructure, they're generally talking about airports, roads, railroads, things of that sort. Water is an important element of the discussion, but it doesn't rise to the top of the priority list. So what's going on is that the committees of jurisdiction in the House and Senate that deal with water infrastructure, water, wastewater, water recycling, are developing their own packages of infrastructure assistance that would then become part of an overall infrastructure policy that might be developed probably later this year in sort of October, November timeframe. The pieces will start coming together, but it's going to carry on into 2018. What the policy debate is centering on today is, number one, protecting and enhancing the State Revolving Loan Fund program, as well as WIFIA. WIFIA is the acronym for the highly subsidized loan program that was enacted a couple of years ago that will give municipalities as well as private water companies the opportunity to get loans at the Treasury rate. And that, going forward, you would have a ability to leverage very few federal dollars into federal assistance to build projects. The other issue that is front and center is P3, which is public-private partnerships. This is something that has gained a lot of attention on the road side and on the airport side. The challenge is on the water side, it's very hard to put a toll booth on a water system. So what we're seeing now is a lack of enthusiasm, if you will, to allow for P3s as a key element of water infrastructure. But what we are seeing is a receptivity, if you will, to maybe have pilot programs to allow for public-private partnerships for communities that may not have a AAA rating and need help putting together financing for their project needs. But I don't see P3s being a central element of a water infrastructure package. The next issue, I'm going to jump over Buy America and get back to that in a second. The next issue is outright privatization. There's been a lot of pushback on privatization in Congress. This is something that the administration has looked at and has thought maybe this will work. By and large, a number of conservative members in the House and Senate, this is not a liberal or conservative issue, but I want to highlight that people like Chairman John Barrasso of Wyoming, who is the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee with jurisdiction over your issues of concern, have said that I don't see where privatization works for water, for example, because it's just hard to imagine that you are going to get development of infrastructure projects on a private basis that can deliver affordable water supply. So I think that from a privatization circumstance, we're not going to see a lot going on the water side there. Maybe some kind of, again, pilot program to allow for privatization, but not on the water side for the most part. And then on recycling, this is an innovative approach that's being seriously considered by the administration. The concept would be, whether it's a federal facility or, say, a city facility or special district facility, you would essentially sell those or assets or give those assets to a buyer, and then that buyer, recent revenues that they give to you could be recycled, if you will, back into your needs, so that you might sell. I don't see this happening on the water side, specifically the wastewater side, where you might have a clarifier, like a silly example, that you would sell. The revenues from selling that clarifier would then go back into your system to build something else. I think it really is more of something like, let's say, the Central Valley project, the water supply project for the Central Valley in Southern California, where the feds might say, let's just sell that to somebody, and the revenues we get we'll put into water programs at the federal level to assist communities. That's where I see that happening on recycling. And then Buy America, I want to point something out. So on Buy America, it came about from the stimulus bill originally many years ago, and there has been a consistent sort of drumbeat, particularly with the election of President Trump, that we need to make things in America. And so what appears to be happening is a decision, and again I have to emphasize, these decisions are sort of evolving, but a decision that let's do Buy America mandates for infrastructure relative to American iron and steel and not manufactured products. The logic being twofold. One, iron and steel, you can figure out how to do it and make certain it's made in America. And two, when you think about manufactured products, whether it's membrane technologies or pumps and what have you, public agencies have to find the best technology that's out there to meet their needs. And the policymakers in Washington have said, we understand that issue. We understand that it can lead to increased costs as you try to figure out whether you're complying with another federal mandate. So at the end of the day, we're pretty optimistic that any Buy America mandates that might be part of an infrastructure package will just focus on American iron and steel and not touch on manufactured products. And if it does touch on manufactured products, that there'll be enough, shall we say, waiver opportunities so that if you needed to have a technology that wasn't produced in America in either reliable quantities or that it was more expensive to buy the product in America relative to another product overseas, that would allow you to use the product. So I see that as the way that any kind of Buy America mandates would evolve in an infrastructure policy. Okay, so regulatory reform. This is the big one, I think. So everybody's complaining about President Trump and how he's rolling back regulations. Let me say that this whole effort had its genesis under President Obama, because President Obama used the pen to do a lot of things when he was in office that he couldn't get through Congress. So what's going on is you're seeing this administration just picking up from the last administration. And one of the top clear examples of this is the Clean Water Rule. And well, this was rolled back and it's in court and what have you, being reviewed whether it's right or wrong and what regulated waters are out there under the Clean Water Act. What is happening now is that the administration is taking its time. In December, it's going to release a rule that will rewrite what waters in the United States are considered to be regulated under the Clean Water Act. It will take public comments from the public starting in December, and then it will issue a new rule that will bring clarity to what waters are subject to regulation under the Clean Water Act. That's important because we were able to succeed in securing clarification in the original Obama proposal that essentially exempted wastewater treatment operators from the rule, from further regulation under the Clean Water Act. The other thing that was clarified was that water recycling activities, such as what you're engaged in and the transfer of waters and what have you to other areas, would not be impacted by any kind of additional mandates under the Clean Water Act. We are pretty certain that this administration will not reverse those provisions that were in the Obama regulation, that under any circumstances, we think that what will happen is that they will say a water that's subject to regulation is a water that you can put a canoe in, for example, and paddle. That would be a water that would be subject to regulation. So that's a sort of an exaggerated explanation, but at the end of the day, I think the message I want to leave with you is that you won't see more regulatory burdens imposed upon you, either on the water recycling side or on the clean water side. Permit streamlining, very quickly, we are working to see with other groups the extension of NPDES permits under the Clean Water Act from 5 to 10 years. We're hopeful that we will see that put into legislation in the House, and that will go through the House later this summer or early fall, go to the Senate, where the Senate has passed a bill similar, but doesn't have the permit terms, to allow for integrated planning, which allows you to sort of be more cost effective in developing your permitting processes. And then hopefully that will be enacted into law early next year, all sort of things going well. So that's that simple little change from 5 to 10 years to deliver cost effectiveness and efficiencies to your activities and save your resources. A couple of quick points. Endangered Species Act enforcement activities. There is a wholesale review in the administration from a regulatory approach on how they can, number one, look at the Endangered Species Act in a more commonsensical approach so that you're not tying up project deliveries and construction activities simply because of the Endangered Species Act's many layers of consultations with federal agencies. We see that being reviewed over the next several months as part of the President's effort to reorganize the federal government. And under enforcement, what we're seeing is a decision at EPA that enforcement actions that are being taken at the regional level have to first be approved by headquarters. So what you're seeing is a centralization of decision-making processes on enforcement activities being pulled from the regions and into headquarters. And in many respects, it's a very good thing because now you're going to be able to have other actors saying to the regional officials, wait, before you go forward in enforcing against this agency, have you thought about this or whatever else? So it's a good checkpoint. And then reorganization. The President issued an executive order, I believe in March of this year, where he asked each federal agency head to review their programs and to look at ways in which efficiencies at the federal level can be brought about by either collapsing programs together, moving programs to other federal agencies where there is a more relevant purpose for that program to be in that federal agency, or perhaps eliminating a program because it's been around for decades and it really doesn't deliver benefits anymore. That reorganization directive will result in a formal proposal from each federal agency to the Office of the Management Budget in September, and we will at that point know what the agency in the form of EPA and Interior is recommending with respect to development of new ways of conducting business through their programs. The one thing that we're waiting to see is whether they move the State Revolving Loan Fund program, recommend moving the State Revolving Loan Fund program out of EPA and into the Department of the Treasury, because it is really a finance program, and in many respects, folks are saying, why don't we just let the Treasury Department handle the financing issues, because that's what they do. So we'll be looking at that and be interested to see what goes on. Very sort of the last of the 4 items that I wanted to bring to your attention, appointments and retirements. So EPA and the Interior Department continue not to have a full deck, if you will, of political appointments. That is slowing things up. Nonetheless, we are starting to see folks being nominated or confirmed. At EPA, we've got a Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Water. We've got at Department of the Interior a guy by the name of David Bernhardt, who actually came from your council's office, I believe, at one point. Years ago. David is going to be the #2 person at the Interior Department. He's a good guy. He's a smart guy. He'll be important for the Interior Department because he understands Western water issues. That's all really good. And then on the Council of Environmental Quality, there are a number of folks in there that have been drawn from the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. So we have people that are sitting in the Council of Environmental Quality, which has jurisdiction over managing all the various programs on the environmental side of the federal agencies, coordinating them, what have you, that they understand the laws, and they're going to be in a position to exert some kind of sort of management style, if you will, on how to deal with the environmental issues at the agencies. And they will also be very integral in the development of infrastructure policy going forward. So that's where we are on the appointment side and what have you. The one last point I would point out is retirements. So we've all heard about the sort of graying of the workforce. This is going on at the bureaucracy in a big way. People are able to leave the bureaucracy and retire. One of the other things that's happened is that the Trump administration is putting in place early buyouts and financial incentives to leave federal government early. And what we see, particularly at EPA, is a host of senior career agency folks putting in their papers to retire. So there's sort of a good news, bad news story. Some of the people who have been vexing us over the years when it comes to policy and mandates, what have you, are going to leave. The bad news is we don't have people to fill those slots to manage the programs. So we're going to have to see what happens, but I think that's something to watch for and recognize that it could also have impacts to you here when you think about Region 9 and people leaving there and who's going to mind the stores and what have you. So that's where we are there. And as David comes up, I just would like to say one thing about all of these issues, which is it's a lot of change, it's a lot of disruption, but from these changes and these disruptions are opportunities. And we are truly in a position right now where, because the importance of infrastructure is shared by Republican, Democrat, centrist, conservative, liberal alike, that I think we're going to see a lot of activity in the next 6 to 12 months on infrastructure. And I'll get to that in a few minutes after David presents.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Dwayne, Director Wallace, it's nice to see you here today, most certainly. I'm certain as many of you woke up yesterday and smelled the smoke, it made you not just nervous, but also concerned about the ability of the region to respond to wildfire. We are now on the 10th anniversary of the Angora fire. And as you can see by the editorial that was penned by the general manager, we reflect back on what has taken place since that fire and how the district has responded and how the district has been in a unique position to be a leader throughout the basin for all water agencies to obtain federal assistance for much needed water infrastructure, specifically for fire suppression. Since the Angora fire and the recommendations that there is deficiencies in the basin, there's been approximately $17 million in federal assistance, which multiplied by the local contribution places around 35 to almost $40 million of water infrastructure for increased storage, distribution, hydrants, water lines, generators throughout the basin through the partnership, which was recently renamed the Tahoe Water for Fire Suppression Partnership. I think that accomplishment and activities, leadership of Lynn Nolan on the grant side, Shannon on shepherding, the project type work has been a great success. As we look at where do we go from here, the district took a strong position on the reauthorization of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, which passed last December. We worked hard with the stakeholders of the basin so that the entire package supported the needs of the basin. And there are two key elements in there specifically led by the district. One is to make sure that this fire partnership that's been developed is an authorized project and that we can seek funding through the normal authorization process to continue this effort. The other element was that should any environmental work take place under the Tahoe Restoration Act, that the district is not left on the hook, that 2/3 reimbursement would be provided for any relocations associated with those environmental projects. So those are great elements to be in there. Where does the Tahoe Restoration Act stand now? Currently in the House Appropriations bills, and I say currently because they're still working through the process, the only funding available at this point has been $3 million targeting invasive species, which is certainly an important issue in the basin and for the district. The Senate, there's been an effort by the entire Senate delegation, being Heller and Cortez, Masto in Nevada, and Feinstein and Harris in the Senate have been uniform in putting forward a strong request for full funding for the Tahoe Restoration Act. They have yet to the Senate is yet to move the bills that have jurisdiction on that yet. So they're still waiting, but it's going to really fall in their lap to push hard on this. And the district continues to express full support for full spending in the Senate, and as the House works to resolve their issues as well. As we look at the smoke from the Mariposa fire, the Detweiler fire, that's 73,000 acres that's burning. And I think it's evidence, and we look at the dead and dying trees in the Sierras, that we need to address forest health. The conditions of our forests threaten our watersheds, our environment, our way of life, not just in Tahoe, but throughout the West. And there's two efforts that are moving forward to address that, and I think they're really, in the end, will become one, is how you provide the Forest Service with appropriate funding mechanism so that they can respond to catastrophic wildfire. And it's interesting that in 1995, and certainly Director Jones, with experience in the Forest Service, knows these issues very well. In 1995, about 15% of the Forest Service budget was dedicated to wildfire and the response to wildfire. As of last year, we're over 50% of the Forest Service budget is dedicated to just responding to wildfires. And it's really just 1 or 2% of the wildfires that are the catastrophic nature that consume 30% of all those funds. So there's an issue called fire borrowing. The Forest Service, in effect, funds on a 10-year average. When they reach that spending level, they dip back into their own pockets and they take money out of their watershed programs, out of their other programs, which limits the ability to get work done on the ground. So there's a strong effort in Congress to address that fire borrowing issue. The other side, and I think Aqua is a strong voice in this, is that we can't just address the funding. We need the tools in place to better manage our forests so that we can make them fire safe or fire resilient is a better term, so that they can, if there is a fire, it stays low and it becomes more of a healthy fire versus the high destructive fires that we see now. There's legislation in the House, it's called the Westerman Bill. It's HR 2936, and it provides, especially I think in there, it really focuses on municipal watersheds, which is really key. But the other element, and this is important to the basin, is that it focuses on collaborative projects. So the Tahoe West project and other projects that are taking place where you have perhaps water agencies working for the Forest Service or the Nature Conservancy or other conservancies in the region, it provides incentive for those projects to happen and take place in a more timely manner. So we are monitoring both the fire borrowing and the management issues for the district. And as we look at what's going to take place the rest of the year, just yesterday, and this is the arcane nature of Congress, there's a flood insurance bill. That is a must-pass bill. They have to reauthorize flood insurance. So they attach the fire borrowing language to that. So we have to be aware of any vehicle that might be moving. It's important to note, too, that there are issues with how you obtain that money for the fire borrowing, but I won't bore you with those details at this point. In the Senate, we look for legislation, especially as we see this summer progress and wildfires progress. Senator Murkowski from Alaska, is very active in these issues. She has a different forest type to deal with and different matters up there. Senator Cantwell, a Democrat from Washington State, majorly involved as well. That's the community issues and communications. The other side, and Director Jones is aware of this, in terms of getting collaborative projects done, the one element that's been missing has been the ability to avoid litigation at the end of the process. So everyone collaborates together, works as a community with the Forest Service and all the local entities, and they get a project moving forward that's going to be 10 or 20,000 acres, and then the lawsuits start to come. And the lawsuits may not be constructive of the project. We need that voice in there so that everyone's part of the process, but there needs to be a constructive way to address litigation. And the Westerman bill deals with that in terms of arbitration, to encourage those that have been participating and those that have not to sit at the table and work out their differences and have options that are put forth that are focused on the health of the forest, not the health of someone's wallet. So we expect both in the House and the Senate whether it's within legislation this year or next year as we approach the Farm Bill, that the issue of wildfire and forest health and watershed management will be front and center. So thank you very much. Are there any questions today?
So the outlook. So we thought of tons of clever little, I don't know, graphics or what have you. The only one we could come up with that sort of captured it beautifully was that the future is encrypted. Anybody who tells you right now that they know ultimately how things are going to play out in the next 6 months, 12 months time, probably is either a genius or is lying to you. But I think there are a couple of things we can tell you that are legitimate. First of all, what has happened on healthcare is important because it ratchets up the demand on Congress, both from the Republican side and the Democratic side, to perform. And that's what you're going to see in the next couple of weeks. I think that's the first thing. Is what's going to happen is increasing pressure from constituents, from business interests to do something to help the economy out. And that goes to infrastructure. The second thing that's going to happen are deadlines. What we didn't talk about was the debt ceiling. That expires in September timeframe. Congress has to do something on the debt ceiling or we shut down in the worst possible way, from paying Medicare and Medicaid to international obligations, what have you. So for our purposes, we're looking and say, okay, September, you've got that deadline. You also have a deadline to pass a federal budget on October 1. We just said to you earlier that probably we're looking at November, December timeframe for that to be dealt with, continuing resolution. You have an administration that is, quite frankly, disregarding deadlines as part of that sign disruption ahead. So that sort of gets into the mix on the pressure to perform. How do we go forward? What do we do? All this, I think, leads you almost into a situation where you can leverage these deadlines for policy initiatives. And we go back to David's reference on firefighting and the Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill has to be renewed. I mean, it's expiring, and that's a huge hit on the nation's bottom line when it comes to exports of commodities. We have to look at the fact that infrastructure can jumpstart the economy, and so there's a policy initiative that can be leveraged through these deadlines to show that something is getting done. So the message that we would like to leave you with is, number one, so the core issues of concern to the district are moving forward, notwithstanding what you see on the nightly news or in the papers or on the internet, that Congress is doing some things. And that on the big ticket items, it's all going to carry over into 2018. And that 2018, with the midterm elections front and center, the pressure to do something to sort of validate your existence coming to Washington, by the way, not you guys, but your elected officials, coming to Washington will be there. And I think what the bottom line, trying to figure out what is ahead of us, is a very, very busy policy deliberation period, say November. We're actually with the deadline of the debt ceiling, say from September all the way through till next summer. So at this point, we're happy to answer any questions. If we jumped over something too quickly, we'd be happy to explain it in detail. Thank you.
This is a really good report. I had a question about our work. As you know, we have one generator at the bottom of the hill, and I thought you mentioned that projects that generate funds could go a little bit to the head of the line because they were producing funds back to the project. Did you say
I may have misspoken. So what I was suggesting was, if you had an asset that was generating revenue, for example, or any asset that you want in the concept of recycling, you could sell that to a buyer. There'd be tax advantages and everything else.
Okay.
And then the money you got back, you could reinvest in your priorities, if you will. However, the question becomes, do you want to lose your rights to that piece of technology or treatment process or what have you?
Okay.
And it has to be generating some income.
Yeah. Yeah,
But-
to have value to sell.
right, it would have to have a lot more.
But Director Wallace, you do raise an interesting point when you talk about revenue generation and energy. There is an energy bill that will likely have the pressure to perform. There is an energy bill that failed last year due to just the nonsense that was going on between the House and the Senate at the last hours of the session. The majority leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, has put that bill on the floor of the House, and we expect debate to begin in August when they're here for the extra 2 weeks in the Senate. If they do that, there may be programs of assistance to support energy efficiency, innovative energy technology type activities for the water sector under something called a Water Sense program. So you may actually see technology assistance in that field.
Yeah, it isn't like Congress wasn't warned. I mean, little podunk guy like me, I remember I was with about 20, 25 congressmen, and just happened to be everybody else cleared out of the room, and I had a bunch of them there, and asked them if they were aware of how angry the American people were and how something's got to happen, that maybe not even good, but something's got to happen. And they just kind of stared at me like, well, I'll be okay, or I don't know. The other, and then I'm done, is on transportation issues. We were talking about our bypass up here, and we're talking about whether that bypass had an opportunity to go through. And what I was told by Congressman McClintock is that if it's infrastructure, it's got a good chance, just because it's infrastructure. Is that kind of the feeling you're getting?
Yes, and in fact, going back to the permitting streamlining effort, one of the things that is front and center, particularly on transportation projects, or any project, is let's figure out a way to get these projects built faster. There is an understanding that the permitting process in many respects has become the end rather than the means to an end. And you're seeing that consistently in legislation introduced to expedite and put deadlines on agency approvals before the project gets moving forward. And I think that will be part of the infrastructure debate.
And part of that is probably the, from what I've heard, at least when it comes to Forest Service, is eliminating some of the ability to file suit on projects, and that's going forward as well, isn't it?
That's correct. There are a number of proposals out there, including on David mentioned collaboration and forest fire activities, but across the board, that there needs to be a check on the sort of endless rounds of litigation to stop projects. And so and there is an acknowledgement, I'm not going to say it's universal, but there is an acknowledgement that there's got to be a solution to the current practices that are tying projects up that ultimately get built. And, you know, in many respects, I would sort of parenthetically like to say that both Congressman McClintock and Senator Feinstein both believe, I think, that there needs to be some kind of way to make certain projects can be built with certainty. And there you have sort of two ends of the political spectrum. So there you go.
Thank you.
Question about EPA. You say that their budget is now looking like 7% reduction, or Trump wanted to reduce it by, I've heard a couple of figures, 31 to 36%. He can still do a lot of things to reduce the effectiveness of EPA and their enforcement and the research and things like that they're doing. How do you think that's going to affect us? And the same thing's also happening with NASA and NOAA that you know.
So from a district-specific response, the impact probably will be minimal for two reasons. Number one, you've got on just the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, assuming they put some money in there beyond invasive species, that you've got members like Tom McClintock, Dianne Feinstein, on the Nevada side, the delegation there, that want to see those programs funded. Second of all, from a sort of general 30,000-foot level, one of the things that occurred was the administration's desire to zero out the Great Lakes Initiative, which is sort of equivalent to the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, trying to restore the health of the Great Lakes, $300 million. Congress and the House, not the Senate, but the Senate's going to follow suit. Congress and the House said, no, we're putting that money back in, and there are deadlines, and you will spend that money. Otherwise, that money is impounded, and that violates the Budget Impoundment Act. So I think from a budgetary standpoint, a lot of smoke, but not a lot of fire. However, from a research component or from, say, a rulemaking side of the House, we're not going to see much happening, I believe, going forward, other than rollback efforts and maybe a targeted research initiative, say, to anything that's court ordered or what have you. So there will be some impacts, but from a district standpoint, I'm not convinced that you're going to see it hitting home. I will say also, if you hear that the State Revolving Loan Fund program for clean water, not drinking water, was cut by $200 million in the House, that's correct. That was used to pay for the Great Lakes and other project needs in EPA's budget. But in the final days, when they cut a deal, everybody knows that money is going to be put back. So at the end of the day, you're going to have current year spending of about $2.4 billion for the SRF program.
I just wanted to make a comment and express my appreciation for the work that Eric and David have done for us back in Washington, D.C. They stay in contact with us so that they're aware of what we have going on as our issues as well as our projects that are going forward. And they keep us abreast of what's going on in D.C. so that the other thing that they do is also maintain relationships representing us with our legislators and the regulators back there, so that when opportunities for funding or other issues arise, or we have a need that we decide that we need our legislators to weigh in on, they're able to very quickly reach out and turn those relationships into results for us back in Washington, D.C. They've done a fantastic job for us, and I just want to say how much I appreciate that. We've had a good working relationship, and I think our level of communication back and forth has been very effective. We're not wasting anybody's time. We're focused on the issues that matter for us, and I really appreciate that.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. And I would also state, aside from the fact that David and I both greatly appreciate the opportunity to represent you in Washington, I would also say that the visits that Director Wallace, Director Jones,
I haven't gone.
No, you weren't. But you've been. I would say that the visits have only sort of solidified the support that your delegation has expressed in the years, and it's no small accomplishment. You should be very proud of what has happened on fire, on NTBE over the years, any number of things, Forest Service activities and permits. It's all been because of sort of the team effort, and by your diligence in working at the local level with your folks, as well as coming back to DC every so often, it all adds up to the ability to get things done.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bledsoe.
Good afternoon. Every year at this time, the district prepares a customer delinquent list who are late on their bills to turn over to the El Dorado Tax Assessor's Office. We have now put that list together. We'll be collecting those funds for another couple of weeks before we send the final amount over to actually put it on as a tax lien. So I guess first thing I need to do is hold a public hearing to receive public comment protest regarding the delinquent accounts.
Let's consider that open then.
Closed.
Is there anything you need to do before
Yeah,
we do this?
I want to just give you a couple ideas.
Why don't
about,
you give your little spiel first in case
Yeah.
we have a
What
clamor to.
What it is the, if you look at the list, there's roughly $406,000 that's listed.
I couldn't find my personal number on there, thank God.
That's a good thing. Just to let you know, out of that number, 43% of that amount is totals that are made up of multifamily dwellings, hotels, or sewer-only accounts, which is basically accounts that we can't do anything about. There's nothing we can do about those amounts to collect.
So those just keep rolling over?
Those just we turn them over, and then that wipes the slate clean for the customer's account.
When he's saying there's no physical way to turn off the service.
Right, I understand that, but in
Right.
terms of, do we get the money out of it though?
That's why you're doing this process.
Right?
We do eventually get it, but sometimes that can take up to 4 or 5 years to collect that amount.
We do get most of it.
We do get most of it.
Only 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
Patience is a virtue.
Is it ever? And also, just to let you know, you will notice there is one account on the list that is probably around $47,000, and that does make up about 11.5% of the total amount of this list, which is basically a mobile home park that we can't do anything with either. There's no way to cut the water or services off at this place as well.
You guys are aware of that rule that we would work under like the city or the county health department will say that people living there who don't have the opportunity to pay the whole bill, so we can't shut off just because the mobile home park owner is not paying us. We can't
Right.
turn off the master meter.
But somehow POA can.
Yeah, they can, but
I'm not opening that door, I'm just saying. Apparently, it can be done, just not by us.
as a public entity, no, we can't do that. We're not allowed to be used as a eviction, I guess, for a landlord to get tenants out of a building or shut down businesses or anything like that. So anyway, that's just kind of give you and as far as the rest of the accounts, several of these accounts have land liens that are already on them, and several of the others have the services have already been shut off. So there's very few that we can actually do anything with.
Hey, Tim.
Yes.
Why don't you give them the information that you gave me just a few minutes before the board meeting about what you expect, based on past history, this number to possibly be when it's officially turned over?
Yeah, based on past history, I mean, as you can see, there's 406,000 that's due now at 352 accounts. Normally on past history, but between now and the time that we do turn this over to the tax assessor's office, we will collect probably another $125,000 of this money between now and then. Notices have already gone out. We'll be sending second notices, and so the money a lot of it will come in between now and then.
Years ago, you actually hired somebody for a temporary job to actually go after some of these, and I thought it proved worthwhile. Has there been any consideration of doing that again, or?
Well, we have actually been more proactive in the collections process. The only problem is when we bill quarterly, we normally have about 1,800 to 2,000 accounts that's delinquent every quarter. So we work 1,800 to 2,000 accounts that are delinquent every quarter. And so for us to be able to take that number and work it down to 352 accounts, I feel like we've come a long ways over the years.
Yeah.
So today I'm asking the board to approve the list of delinquent accounts and adopt resolution number 3064-17, authorizing the list of delinquent accounts to be added to the 2017-18 El Dorado County Tax Assessor's Roll.
So moved.
And I guess at this time we can close the public hearing. So before we vote on that.
Oh.
So in a second from Kelly. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. And that passes 4-0. Okay, we've got a, looks like a change order on primary clarifier number 1 and aeration basin number 2.
Yes, good afternoon. So I'm here today to ask the board to approve change order number 1 to FAR Construction in the amount of $267,838.45. This change order addresses 2 work items that are beyond the scope of the contract. The first one is, so after we bid the project, but prior to construction, district staff inspected some conduits that are mounted within the aeration basin and found that these conduits were, while they looked good from the outside, the inside they were severely corroded, and the wires were also corroded as well and needed to be replaced. We had a portion of these conduits being replaced already as part of the project, so we asked the contractor for a price to replace the conduits and wire in this location, and also run new wire to some of the new instruments that we are installing as part of the project. And so the contractor provided us a cost. Both district staff and the district's consultant did review the cost estimate that was provided and found it to be reasonable. And so that item is for $59,838.45. The second item is technically unrelated to the primary clarifier 1 aeration basin 2 rehabilitation project, but it is something that the contractor has experience with the methods that we want to use to address this issue, and that's with our flagpole tank number 1. We discovered last spring that it was leaking, and so then we had a consultant do an inspection, provide recommendations, and I was before the board a couple months ago to have them, to get them authorized to do contract documents. We didn't go as far as contract documents since we already had a contractor on board and didn't have to bid it. So we did save some money there, and will not be using all of the money, all of the funds that were approved for the consultant. So we provided those details to the contractor. We've negotiated with them for a cost, and they gave us a cost of $208,000 to rehabilitate the flagpole tank number 1. They will be rehabilitating the CMU block. This is one of those unique aspects of the district. We're one of the few places that I know of that has a CMU block water tank, and so we have to repair the CMU block. Also, the mortar between the CMU needs to be repointed, and then provide a coating that will provide a waterproof barrier that should stop leaks and also help prevent root intrusion, which is one of the issues we were seeing at the tank. And so the cost that we got from the contractor is actually the same price that we're getting on the work that they're doing on aeration basin 2 and primary clarifier 1, because we're using the same coating product to do the coating. So with that, if there's any questions on change order number 1.
And we had a long discussion at the operations committee meeting on Monday, and agree on what is proposed, and I'll move that we approve the change order for FAR Construction, DBA Resource Development Company, in the amount of $267,838.45.
Second that.
And that passes 4-0. Thanks. Now we get to hear all about the Big 5.
Big 5. So I have provided a handout for you guys that I will use as part of my presentation. So at first, the first page of it is just a map of where the Big 5 pump stations are located. They consist of the Tahoe Keys Pump Station, El Tahoe Pump Station, Upper Truckee Pump Station, Johnson Pump Station, and Bijou Pump Station. And we call these the Big 5 because of their capacity. I mean, in our system, they are the 5 largest pump stations. They 4 of these 5 pump directly to the wastewater treatment plant, and they drain 4 of our 5 sewer basins. So they're critical to our ability to transport and treat wastewater. They handle 93% of the flow that comes to our wastewater treatment plant. And they all were built between 1955 and 1972, so they are fairly old, anywhere from 60 to 47 years old, 45. No, yeah, 45. The Bijou pump station was built in 55. It was the district's original office and first pump station. Tahoe Keys and El Tahoe were built in 1960, Upper Truckee in 1967, and the Johnson pump station in 1972. El Tahoe was modified in 1996. We put in a new, larger wet well, and I know from talking to the pumps crew that that wet well provides a lot more storage, a lot more capacity, and we get a lot more have a lot more response time available in that basin because we have a larger wet well. And that wet well is actually 10 to 20 times the volume of the wet wells of the other 4 of the big 5. So at those pump stations, they are much smaller, and that affects our holding time and really reduces the response time we have at some of those pump stations. Now to talk through with some of the photos, I provided one photo for each pump station, and I'll kind of tell you some of the issues that we're seeing at each of the pump stations. And I'll start with Tahoe Keys. That pump station only has 2 pumps. Normally we'd want to have 2 duty and 1 standby at a pump station. All the other big 5 do have that configuration. So reliability and redundancy is a big concern at that pump station. And not only does it only have 2 pumps, the pumps are old and obsolete. The district staff actually has to make parts when things go wrong for these pumps. This photo, it's hard to see what's in it, but that's kind of the point. There's very limited space there. And so even just to try to take a photo of the entire pump station was hard because it's such a tight configuration in there. We also have the pump bases have cracked over the years, and district staff has provided straps on them, but there's definitely issues that need to be addressed at this pump station. Moving on to the next photo is Upper Truckee, and that photo basically is to show you the proximity to the river channel. And that hatch that's open that I'm standing next to in the photo is the hatch to the wet well. So if that wet well were to overflow, there's pretty much no way to stop it from going into the river. The Upper Truckee pump station also has the same pumps as Tahoe Keys, the same style. So again, they're obsolete. There's a safety concern with the configuration of those pumps because they have the motors on one level and the pumps on a lower level, and there's drive shafts in between them that spin very high RPMs. And if those were to break while they're spinning and someone's in there, that's a potentially very dangerous situation. During the 2017 winter storms, we were very lucky we didn't spill at this pump station. We were very close. We had all 3 pumps running, which is not the way we want to operate the pump station. So we want to look at the capacity of this pump station and make sure that we can handle flows like we saw in 2017. Moving on to Bijou. This pump station is located in the McDonald's parking lot, right off of Highway 50. It's, again, like I said, the oldest one. The wet well has this funky configuration where you actually walk on stairs to get down into it. This photo that I provided is sort of an example of how we could update to more modern methods of operating our system. I mean, this is what we have to do on a daily basis to alternate the pumps in this pump station, and there's a limitation on how fast we can run these pumps. So there's things that we should be able to improve at this station to make sure that not only does it run more efficiently, but also more seamlessly. The next one is Johnson Pump Station, and this is the youngest one, but it's still 45 years old. It probably has the least number of problems, but again, it has a really small wet well. The site is fairly constrained. What you can't see in the photo is right around it is fairly wet, marshy area. This is right on the corner of Johnson and Highway 50, for if you didn't recognize the whatever it was in the photo. And there's also overhead power lines, and the only way to get things in and out are through that hatch that's on the roof to get the pumps and things out like that. So that's when we have to use a crane to do that, and we've got the overhead power lines right there. There's just some safety issues that we've been able to address, but we may be able to improve upon. And then finally, El Tahoe, like I mentioned, we did update this pump station 20 years ago. We built a new wet well. Basically, the hatches you see on the concrete, that is where the new wet well is. It was, from my understanding,
You're missing that.
You're missing that one? Darn it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I will just talk about it instead. Sorry. Okay, El Tahoe. It was originally built in the 60s, and the original pump station was identical to Tahoe Keys. When we did update it, we abandoned the pumps in that pump station. However, the piping that goes into that pump station is still connected. It's live. It's got wastewater in it at all time. The wet well that was from the original pump station is also still used. So that all the wastewater flows through that wet well, and then a lot of times things settle out inside that wet well, so it becomes a maintenance issue for our crews because that can create odor issues, and so that there's things there that can be improved upon as well. And this pump station is actually our largest pump station by capacity. It's something like 30 pump stations flow to it, 31 pump stations flow to it. So it's very critical to our operations. So with all that background, what staff has done is we, as part of the capital improvement program, we identified doing a condition assessment and upgrades to these pump stations. We have about $6 million in the upcoming 10-year capital plan for improvements at these 5 pump stations. So we put out an RFP to consultants, had very strong interest. We received 8 proposals in response to our RFP, and we had a review committee that was formed with engineering, with field operations, and with pumps to review these RFPs. And based on our review process, Corollo Engineers was identified as the preferred consultant, and so they provided us a scope, which a scope and our estimate, and we've reviewed that, and we feel like that covers what we want to do for this first step of this process. So Corollo does have an existing master service agreement with the district, and so we have a task order ready for them to go if it will be approved today. Basically the condition assessments will look at what they are. What's the condition of the pump station from a physical standpoint, from electrical standpoint, structural standpoint, and see what improvements may be needed for those pump stations. And then also we will provide alternatives evaluations of what those improvements will look like, get cost estimates on what they are, and a prioritization of the projects based, and not only just from each pump station, like what's the most highest priority for that pump station, but between the 5 pump stations, like which one of the 5 is our highest priority based on risk and to the district. So with all that, district staff requests that the board approve task order 9 with Corollo Engineers in the amount of $399,898 for engineering services associated with the Big 5 pump stations condition assessment. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Which one did you say was the original office?
That would be Bijou.
Oh, Bijou was, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
You remember that, don't you, Wayne?
I do.
Thought so.
I actually do. I remember when they wanted to put the McDonald's in, and we had to work at an agreement on the odors.
Yeah.
And it worked.
It's in the middle of the McDonald's
Sort
parking
of
lot.
improved the smell. I'll pull it in there.
What's as long as they keep the fryers going, and McDonald's, it masks it very well.
I believe we don't get many odor complaints from that one. So.
Yeah.
I keep ordering onion rings from them, but they don't have them. It just smells like it.
Is this expenditure eligible for any El Dorado County Water Agency
Since
money?
it's sewer side, no, it's not.
Okay, on the water side, right?
At Operations Committee meeting the other day, I got a pretty big, more detailed briefing on all of this and the concern that, about these things because they're all, 50 years old almost. And I think we need to move ahead. And the last comment that Steve made was regarding the prioritization, which this will be done over a period of years. So I'll move that we authorize task order number 9 to Corolla Engineers Incorporated in the amount of $399,898 for the Big 5 pump station condition assessment. I thought that it was the pump station right behind the Big 5, but it's all 5 of them. Anyway.
You and I'm sure the staff that works with these pump stations on a daily basis have a pretty good idea of what their assessment is. So how much extra value are we getting? Is it just mainly the alternatives we're getting out of Corolla?
There is, like I said, yeah, there are 2 tasks, so the condition assessment and the alternatives evaluation, and I believe it's split fairly evenly, but a little bit heavier on the alternatives evaluation side, as far as the dollar figures. So we're definitely getting the alternatives evaluation from this, but the condition assessment, they'll be able to do things that we don't have the capability to do, like thermographic imaging of the electrical equipment to see if there's hot spots, see if there's issues that we have to deal with, concrete testing, and other evaluations of the condition of the equipment and the piping as well. So looking also at reliability and redundancy to make sure that we've addressed what's the industry standard versus what what our normal practice is.
Okay, thanks. Did we get a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay. I would have done it. Oops.
It's not, you got it. Yeah, there you go. It doesn't like his finger today.
It does not.
Just the okay is all it needs. There you go.
Yes, yes, Dwayne?
Yeah.
It's in.
Must be the super glue.
Thank you.
Thanks. That passes 4-0. Payment of claims.
I'll move approval of payment of claims in the amount of $2,951,964.32.
I'll second that.
That passes 4-0. Thanks again. Okay, standing and ad hoc committee reports. Anybody have anything?
Just one comment. You all should have gotten a copy of the minutes from the Operations Committee. One item, 3D, says fire flow and water line replacement planning. I think this is really important because they've now got several reports. The staff's going to put them together and establish a plan, prioritization of replacement and upgrade of pipes, and this is really one of the first steps. I don't know if you guys have more comments on that, but I felt that was really important. We need to move ahead on these water lines, especially the fire protection.
We'll also have feedback from the fire department since we've been spending, you and Len in particular, been spending so much time with them. They get some of their perceptions on where they think we need to add facilities.
Yeah, that's been part of our outreach effort with the fire departments, getting some feedback and insights into that, although John's done a great job in the past of working with them as we've developed those those prioritizations in the past, but we're trying to increase some of that, some of the outreach to them, and I think John's done a great job working on improving the analysis that we've used in the past to prioritize which lines we replace first. I think we've all known that these very small water lines that don't have fire capacity need to be replaced. But which ones you do first is a question, and what those highest priorities are, that's what we're trying to come up with. And John, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but.
Project. So there's a lot of things to consider. That's where I over time, $60 million right away, spread this out over time. Very good. Under ad hoc committees, I guess, report, Richard and I met again with the city council's representatives, Wendy David and Brooke Lane, and also Nancy Carey. On Friday, we discussed a variety of issues. I continue to think that these meetings are productive. I think that they learn quite a bit each time. They will be. They're really invested in their proposition on the next ballot concerning a half a percent sales tax, and they want to come and talk to the board. I think what we decide, they're coming the first meeting in August.
The first meeting in August is.
and basically they want to just give a presentation, or just at least a pitch to the board on why they think it's so great. I think that they're going to be asking for us to get behind that. I kind of told them that probably wasn't going to happen, but we'll discuss it at that time. We discussed a lot of different things on that. What sticks out in your mind, Richard?
One of the things that stuck out is that we're preempting blogosphere information getting to the city council, and without verification, because they don't have a habit of verifying things that they hear. And so one of the issues I thought was outstanding was when we brought up the completion of our MOU negotiations, and when I said that we had it was a 10% increase, and they say, yeah, we heard, and I said, and they thought it was 10% right now, when first year, and I said, yeah, that's over 4 years, and you could see the expression of them change and went, oh,
it's only 2.5%.
Oh, it's only 2.5% each year for the next 4 years. I mean, they had been, who knows who had made a comment, but it's that type of interaction when I have to put the smile every time I hear Randy say, yeah, and they're learning a lot from these meetings, is that we're talking about things that are happening at the district that they are not getting the full or even the accurate information on. And so in order, and what prompted it was negative comments made mostly by their city attorney at city council meetings about us, and without them being corrected. So
those go out on TV. And
plus I think it goes out on TV.
That's why I thought we ought to start these, and I'm sorry I've missed a few, but it sounds like they're going good without.
They're going good, because I actually think that if somebody pipes up with something that they know is wrong, they'll probably correct them. So that's why this is a good thing.
And the other thing that's a good thing.
It's incredible how much.
Yes. And the other thing that's a good thing is we also use it as an opportunity to let them know when the city staff is cooperating with us, like the fire department's meetings with Chief Meston now over the firefighting infrastructure, having the city, roads crews, Chris is interacting with them, getting their support and their, with the road detours that are coming up, that occurred in the Keys that are coming up in the future, and thanking them for the city council, the council members thanking them for the city staff support, so giving them kudos, so that at some time down the road we're kind of building a base that if we have an issue or a problem, well, we've given them a bunch of positives, so we're not just hitting them up beside the head only when something negative is happening between us and the city staff. And we are building that. They believed that the staff were working together pretty well, and we're confirming that with them. And we agree that in most of the time, most cases, at the staff level, we've been able to work with the city, and it's really more at the council level where we've had issues with the city.
Do you think they're beginning to see that the attorney is causing them trouble? I mean, I don't understand how they let him do that. I mean, if Gary was every meeting with bad-mouthing the county or bad-mouthing the city, we might say, hey, Gary, that's our job to get us in trouble. You know,
I mean,
let us do it. We do a good enough job.
Well, you know what? You would think so. And when we were first pushing for the meeting,
Get that specific though on things, and it's been a while since Tom has popped up. On stuff.
We got specific in order to get them to agree to the meetings.
Yeah, right.
Because Nancy Carey was sort of lukewarm until I read a couple of the quotes that I think Marla had transcribed from city council meetings, and when she heard me say them, she went, yeah, maybe these meetings would be a good idea. And then she kind of defended them and say, well, you know how attorneys are, they just pop off with things, and it's like, really?
No, we don't.
Yeah. No, we don't know. It's like, so we think they're very, very positive, and they seem to be very anxious to continue them. Our next meeting is August 11th. We do it's the second Friday of the month, and I foresee them continuing to occur on a regular basis, moving to the future.
I owe you one.
Okay, any other
I was.
reports? We move on to board member.
And we did send you good feelings when you had left me a message the night before saying that you might not be there depending on how you were feeling, and so at the very, very beginning of the meeting we wished you the best. You know, when
I appreciate that. The flowers were good, but they not having a note had my wife thinking I was cheating on her. No, I'm teasing. It was too good of a joke not to do. Just let me see that.
Okay, how about board member reports?
I had a small issue on Bertha that Richard and I think our staff took care of before I kind of went incognito there. It was about where a fire plug should be put, and it's something that I hadn't really thought of, but a lot of people in their neighborhoods use the vacant lot next to them or a space next to them to park their cars in the winter especially, and because they can park kind of by the road. And so there was one lady, and I'm sure it got taken care of. When I call in, I don't expect you to do what they say. I just want to make sure that you get back to them.
Sure. Interestingly enough, that particular fire hydrant was the topic of much discussion. There were several other neighbors who had been talking with the project team, particularly Julie Ryan, about where that fire hydrant was located, and they had come to an agreement to relocate that hydrant. It hadn't been installed yet, right? So it's just talking about where we're going to put it in the future. And they had come to an agreement about where it was being placed, and that the person I think who had called in had not been engaged in that conversation with those other property owners. Julie, we have not spoken with her because Julie has played phone tag and tried to get in touch with her, and I think had some calls that were unreturned. It's her understanding that she's satisfied with the new location, but again, we haven't actually had direct contact with her to affirm that.
And for my fellow board members, if they change one spot, sometimes it might change a bunch of them because they have to be a certain number of feet. If it's too far, you know, if we say, oh yeah, we'll do it where you want, then it might actually mess up the fire line.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, the reason I had this gentleman call me today, or I called him back, and I was not aware that we weren't currently supplying water to the Tahoe Keys, but I was concerned that perhaps a fire issue might come up if our water was being used or not being used, and there was a fire, and we were supposed to have supplied the water. I wasn't sure if that was something that might be a problem for us.
That the fire chief didn't he address that in either one of the blogs that they
Well, I haven't seen it was reported that the fire chief didn't know whether you believe the reports or not.
I haven't been reading any.
We in our conversations with the fire department, we did not discuss the marina, so I'm not.
It was on one of the blogs, probably South Tahoe Now, and on TahoeNews.net, and it quoted him as saying that they have a contingency plan.
Sure.
One of the
because they mentioned that the water would cover the hydrants down at the marina.
They bring in the tanker.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, one of the contingencies that this gentleman was talking about was drilling their own well, and I said, well, you might consider that if you're drilling a well, why Tahoe Keys isn't using their own wells? I said, it's my understanding that they've had some trouble with their wells for one reason or another, and so you might want to talk to our staff about whether drilling your own well would be advisable. And then I got to thinking, I didn't tell them, there are situations where groups of customers or a customer could say, I don't want to be part of this other water district anymore. And I didn't tell him that, but so all those kind of things just kind of surfaced, but I was just getting ready to come here and I didn't get a chance to. But I knew that you guys probably were working on it already, as usual.
We were expecting that they were going to ask for if we would consider serving them directly as a customer.
That's what I thought too.
And we were basically just going to get the board's affirmation to at least meet with them and talk about the fact that in order to do that, one, we'd have to run a dedicated line from the Tahoe Keys and Michael intersection down to Venice Drive and down Venice Drive to the point where there aren't any other connections, from the Keys water system to anybody else, maybe most of the way down to the parking lot. So it would be a long installation of a dedicated water line, and then depending upon the size of the meter, because we understand they have a meter with the Keys Water Company, because it would be a connection fee. So we're guessing that it would be far in excess of the $80,000 that they say that they owe the Tahoe Keys. And then the final issue about the dual service agreement is that we in the end we would have to do a little bit of research to see if by the Keys investing, we assume they invested money in their distribution system, if they would have the right to refuse to let the marina go as a water customer. And if you remember the issue we had with Lukens had to agree to let them go. Now, in that case, it was because TJ Maxx was officially in the water service area for Lukens. In this case, the marina is actually outside the service area for the Tahoe Keys. So there could possibly be, we might not have to get the Keys okie dokie to take them on as a direct customer.
All those things kind of swirled around.
Oh yeah,
and that's why you better come talk to the board.
That would have to be looked at as well as the investment in infrastructure and the connection fee.
And there's two sides to every argument.
Yeah.
I get the feeling.
I mean, obviously you were hearing their side of the argument. Who knows? But we have not been involved in that argument. We don't know anything about what's going on. We have no leverage over the Keys Water Company. As I said, the intertie right now, we have an intertie with them, but it's not open, hasn't been opened. They've got their wells running, their PCE treatment on one of the wells, low-level PCE in a second well. I mean, we've been talking in terms of that there was a possibility almost at any time of them coming to us and asking for the intertie to be open. If the PCE in that second well jumps above the MCL, we're going to get the phone call and say, you need to help them, we need to support them in meeting their maximum day demands. So that's hanging over us, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I hadn't seen any blogs. I just got a call from a city council person that was upset. So.
As Richard said, we were expecting to have this conversation generated by the folks here, but we have received a letter from the engineering firm that I guess represents the marina asking us to evaluate this connection. And I think one of the things we had talked about, Richard, was if it's okay, does the board, I guess, give us authority to have a conversation with this engineering firm about this interconnection, explain to them all the issues, so that they're aware of what's happening.
I don't think you need our permission, do you?
You also want to make sure you're in the
I wanted to
loop.
say,
Yeah, no, I
you know,
think it's,
just
I think
let
it's,
them know,
it's
but heck
a
no,
good idea to let them know their options, you know? It's fine, doesn't hurt anything for them to learn a little bit.
All right.
Any board member reports, Jim?
Yeah, I just got one short one. In the latest grand jury report, I don't know if you saw that, but there was one issue about Georgetown Divide. Twain's familiar, I think, with the upheaval that's been going on there for 10 years or more now, where there's they've not gone ahead and replaced a lot of things they should have been replacing. They had a big turnover on their board and their staff. A lot of them quit or were fired. Anyway, they one of the findings, I mean, the first one here is says the district water rates are insufficient to support current operations and infrastructure and maintenance. And I think everybody ought to read this. It's interesting. Maybe if Melanie can make a copy of this, I'll pass it down if you want to look at it and put it in each box for all board members to read.
They have a ditch that they currently use, and to do an upgrade would be extremely expensive. So would they line the ditch? Would they drill new wells? Those kinds of things.
Well, at one point they had state funds that were going to help them, and they decided not to build it, and then the state withdrew all that, and then there's been just a lot of back and forth, and a lot of problems.
It's amazing out there. It seems like there's a lot of retired people, and all they do in their fire district and all that, just fight all the time. It's just a tiny little town.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Under board member reports, I just want to report I was at ECC yesterday morning, and we had a good meeting. It's, I was there. I had a pretty good turnout too. I thought that was pretty good, and probably the main thing I discussed with everybody is I let them know about this ad hoc committee with the city, and that we were trying to improve our relationship at the upper levels. I noted that, of course, our staffs both work together real well. It was just us elected knuckleheads that have a hard time getting along. So that's the main thing that we talked about.
Yeah, we let people know in terms of the status of, you know, the marina issue, you know, and make sure everybody understood what was going on there.
So if they were asked by anybody,
yes,
what are you guys doing with the marina, they knew what the full story
well,
was.
Well, it started off, I mean, last week, I mean, you know, Kay Reed sent me an email asking me, did we turn off the water at the marina? And I wrote back and said, no, they're up to date on their sewer bill, and it's the Keys Water Company, and her response, oh, sorry, I should have known that. But, you know, it's like right away, that, you know, water and sewer, it's, you know, you call the district right away. It's like,
yeah.
And,
okay. El Dorado County Water Agency purveyor.
We didn't have a meeting in July, and the next meeting is August 9th, and it's right here in this room at 10 o'clock.
I thought it was August 11th.
Well, it's the second Wednesday of the month, and I think that's August 9th.
Okay.
Yeah, it's August 2017, August 9th, 10 o'clock. And you'll be able to hear all about the projects that the water agency money is helping us do from John Teal. He's scheduled to give the presentation. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that brings us up to the general manager report.
Yeah, just a short comment. One of the comments that the council members made was reminding us that it would be a good thing for this upcoming Tahoe Keys project to put out some public service announcements. the press releases, let people know we're headed back to the Keys, since they say that over the 6 week of the road closures the last time, that they've been they've been approached. I think Brooke Lane said approached like by three different people about when the district was going to get done with all that mess out there. So I thought that was a good idea, and we've issued those, and you'll hear more about the project under the reports here that are coming from the staff. So, Shelley, did you want to say anything about public outreach in terms of if you've done anything, just an opportunity to say something? I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's like...
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Thompson. I'm the new, old to some, water conservation specialist. I was at the district 10 years ago. I launched the water conservation program then and left to get a degree and wear a few hats, and I'm thrilled to be back. And so something I've been tackling the last few weeks since I started is really dealing with dealing with media, where we at. So I came in late to this meeting because I was just at Lake Tahoe TV doing an interview talking about our groundwater well surveys that will be going on in August and September. I've met with all the radio stations, and I'm updating our outreach there to be relevant to summer and what's going on. And I've met with a few of, not all the newspaper blogosphere folks yet, but I'm meeting with a few tomorrow. So just to reintroduce myself to some, or introduce myself for the first time to others, to talk about what we're doing at the district, figure out who they're to work with. And I'm also trying to create an emergency contact list, so if we need to shut off water, if something happens and we need to get information out immediately, who's the right person to call? Because these days it's text my number, call my cell phone, numbers that aren't listed online. So, and I'm excited that you guys just approved hiring 2 water efficiency technicians for the summer. We have a wait list of over 100 folks on our turf buyback program. I'm thrilled. I started that program a long time ago, and I'm really excited it's so popular. So to try to knock that number back, do a lot of water-wise house calls. Jess Henderson just sent out, I think it was 60 or 70 letters to potential high-use customers that are metered, saying, hey, this is out of the norm. So we're getting a lot of phone calls right now to do leak detections, water-wise house calls. So looking forward to getting staff on to help address those customer needs. So anyway, I'm happy to be back and to be in this role. Am I missing anything, Richard, that you were thinking to address?
No, I just want to give you the opportunity, and sorry for having to do a self-introduction to our board members. Right. I hadn't realized that you hadn't been introduced already. So
glad to have you back.
But the local TV channel, they knew. I didn't have to say anything. They knew you were coming.
Yeah.
Last time I was down there, they went, oh, yeah, Shelley's coming back. Yay! And I'm going, how'd you know?
Right. How'd you know? It's a small town.
Before we had made a formal announcement too.
Word travels fast.
Great, thanks.
So the only other thing I wanted to do was, since Randy and Kelly weren't at the employee picnic, was to give you guys your 5-year service awards.
Oh boy.
Which is, and don't let Wayne steal it.
Oh,
thank you very much for 5 years of service at the district.
My cup had
Is this one of
broken.
these cool new vacuum ones that stays cold forever?
My cup had broken, and that's why I ran again for the board.
Yes.
I'm waiting. I've got a few more years.
You've got a few more years before you can get it.
I'm
And I'm going to make sure they don't count your past board service. So
that hurts. That's a nice looking cup.
So we move on to staff reports.
Staff reports, yes.
I attended a workshop down in Sacramento on this topic, and it is as concerning as I was afraid it would be. Their proposal is essentially, at this point, to subsidize 34% of Californians' water process for this is there's a report they made from UCLA that they are using a portion of it for workshops, and they will, they have not finished that report. They're soliciting public comment, and once that report is completed, they'll issue the draft and solicit for public comment. I am working on drafting a letter to comment upon that, recommending that they both fund the program from the general fund and that they do distribution of those funds, not through water agencies, but if they want to help people who are in poverty with their bills, that they send money to people who are in poverty and not as with creating another bureaucratic system on top of the water programs, so that they help those folks through existing programs like CA.LEN, which is basically a food stamps program. That is a perspective that ADJOURNMENT is also looking at, as well as they have several other comments associated with ideas on this program. The next step for it after this draft report is completed and comments are solicited, they'll finalize that report and submit it to the legislature, and then the legislature will have to take action, legislative action, and in order to implement some sort of plan on those funds. So we'll see what that final report looks like, and continue to express our opposition to both a public goods charge and to having that program really run, having created bureaucracy to run a subsidy program in water. Any questions on that? Next item I have is the long-term water conservation regulation. This is Richard just signing on to a 17-day comment letter from ADJOURNMENT. The working group that submitted from CA put forward with other legislators submitted over work on long-term water conservation regulation. The staff from that working group asked AQUA to submit detailed comments and hence a 17-page comment letter going to the organization. And I don't know, I can't remember what the total number of agencies have been signed on for that letter, but we expect it to be fairly pervasive and statewide. Again, we're trying to, the key piece here that we're trying to combat is giving authority to the state full board to set our water use targets and mandate that, including free penalty, etc. And there's one that does not have that authority. Certainly have support for that position from AQUA and from Representative Bigelow, but there are other folks who want to see the water board have authority in that. So see how this plays out, but we're going to continue to fight the fight. Have to answer any questions about that.
Hey, Sharon. Well, Chris, you sat through this whole thing for this moment.
I only need about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Fallen Leaf Lake, vacuum valve station number 4 is now electric station number 4 and has been running roughly right around 4th of July, 2nd, 3rd of July, and so far running very well. So I do not have any cost on the overall project yet. I checked before the board meeting and we still have a few things coming in. If you'd like, next board meeting I can come up with a total cost for you if you are interested. I would like to say one thing. I know I'm repeating myself, but Fallen Leaf Lake, people out there are very particular when it comes to work being done out there. And I really got to commend the staff here. Pump runs, electrical, sewer department. I think heavy maintenance was out there a little bit too. But they worked right on the edge of the lake, running roughly 400 feet of sewer line. And I never received one negative call, and I believe nobody else did that I know of. And being right on the lake, literally from me to you, is how close we were, digging 3-4 feet. So I really got to commend my crews. I just do.
They've done an excellent job. This was a problem station that hopefully is not a problem in the future with all the work that we've done. We are looking at the end of the summer, instead of waiting to be contract out, I'd like to take a look at it, and I talked to district staff, including Shannon, that we would like to maybe attempt running that pipe up the hill up to vacuum station number 3, which is probably 800 to 1,000 feet up, I would say, just rough guess. So at the end of the summer, when things slow down, we will be taking a look at that, and we'd like to try to do that in-house and get that station turned over to an electric station, which would be a lot more reliable than what it is now. So we are slowly but surely chipping away at it.
I think that's going to be the method for the entire Fallen Leaf Lake system.
I think
the
so.
only way to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're willing to take on the challenge of doing what we can when we can.
Now, how do you, did the rise in the lake affect you much?
Yes.
I mean, you do have the dam that they can let the water out of, but I imagine that was really a problem.
At one point when we went out there to clear out the snow and get down to the Station 4, I was out there one day with Lazaro and a couple other people, and literally the bucket on the front, which is, I don't know, roughly 6-7 feet wide, that was literally 6 inches from the edge of the lake when we were clearing out snow. And the lake went down a little bit, then it came back up. So we kind of timed it out to where the lake was going back down, and we actually hit it pretty good. We still dealt with a lot of groundwater, a lot of issues, but we weren't working, 6 inches away from the lake edge.
One other thing I'd like to add to that is in the past we have routinely, our pump runs folks have routinely received calls to go out to Fallen Leaf and from our alarm system to go out and work on things. Since they've made this repair at now electric pump station number 4, they've not gotten any calls on that pump station at all since it was installed, which given the occupancy out there and the high flows tells me things are running pretty dang good.
Great, thanks. Make sure you tell your staff that the board thanks them for all their good work out there.
I will, thank you, and they'll appreciate that. Tahoe Keys.
Yes.
Well, there's 2 things going on out there. Well, here there is. I never did give you a total price of everything that was all said and done with the work that we did on the 24-inch going into the station. I have finally received all of the bills that I'm aware of, and I came to you a while back and had updated you that labor for the district employees was $173,369.29, but that labor also includes everything involved with our wages, Social Security, all so on and so on. The material that we had used roughly was the Godwin pumps that we had rented, miscellaneous things, running back and forth to Napa and different places like that, was $28,473.57. The one thing I was waiting for was Tom Haynes' bill, which we finally received, and unfortunately it's a lot. All of this whole project is a lot more than what we had originally wanted to do it for, but Tom Haynes' bill, that covers hauling, subcontractors, equipment, everything to do, materials that Tom had to do, $180,427.90. So all in all, it was a $382,270 or 76 job, which is way more than what we anticipated, but with the problems that we ran into out there, it couldn't be helped. So we did our best to save money. I still believe we do. I still believe that if we would have contracted this out and had to pay prevailing wage to people to babysit pumps, things like that, I do believe we'd be looking at more. But as long as you guys know, we tried our best to try to save money.
Well, the $172,000 staff time, that's regular time and overtime. That's all the hours put in.
Everything.
That's
Yeah,
everything.
so a lot of that would have been incurred anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Or they could have been doing something else.
Right.
Yes.
Well, they would have been doing something else, but it wasn't.
Unfortunately, we had a break in a place where 15, 16 feet deep, draining the lake. It couldn't have been any worse of a place to do a problem pipe like that. So the second part of the Tahoe Keys is the liner that we planned on doing from the manhole that we originally worked on, TK1. We were going to go down the street towards the lake, 200 and some odd feet, and then from that manhole up to the intersection where everything comes in through was roughly around 90 feet or so. We did want to do it sooner than now, but there was communication problems, breakdown between ProPipe and us and getting schedules and things like that. Basically, they just weren't calling us back. But we did narrow them down to where they were going to come up next week. And as Richard mentioned earlier, we sent out a press release. I contacted a gentleman, Mr. Brooks, at the Tahoe Keys Homeowners Association. He is going to, or he did send out emails to roughly 800 to 1,000 people that live out there, notifying them that we would be in there next week. We rented a signboard that is up right now on Keys Boulevard off of Highway 50. The city has been nice enough to lend us another one that'll be available, I believe, tomorrow.
Except for Thursdays.
Pardon me?
Except for Thursdays. They use it for Lakeview Commons.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, so
Okay.
they'll take it back Thursday.
And that's fine, because we wanted to stick another one up on Venice Boulevard, catch people coming out and going into the Keys.
And I don't know if Jim Marino had volunteered that, offered that to you earlier, but Nancy Carey offered that to us at our meeting the other day.
It was how I found out.
That's how you
from
found out,
Richard.
okay.
I have to admit, though, I did call Jim Marino last week to notify him and run it by him what we had planned on doing. There was a couple options. One was closing off the Keys, which I believe you guys had heard about before, as far as letting people come around to the 15th Street. They did not think that was going to be a very good option to do because of all the construction on Highway 50. So a couple members of staff and I went out to Reno, and they make a crossing that you can actually drive a 10-wheeler dump truck loaded over. And what it is a metal crossing that goes across the lane. A pipe hooks into one side. You can go clear up to 10-inch flanged pipe hooking to it. The water comes down, goes through these 4-inch tubes that the cars actually drive over, and then allows you to discharge out the other end on a hose.
You need a flagman to slow the cars down to go over that?
We are going to, yes. We're looking at renting 3 of them, and we'll have one on Tahoe Keys Boulevard headed back towards Highway 50. We'll have a line that runs down Keys Boulevard, makes a turn on Venice, then crosses the street again to the manhole that we have to get to. There'll be another crossing there, and then one more crossing right by that manhole on Venice for traffic coming around. So long story short, we should basically be able to keep open all the lanes and the traffic flowing very well through there.
Same bypass that was set up before.
Pardon me?
Same bypass that was set up on previous projects.
Yes, I take that back. The one section that we had closed before, we're going to close that off again because ProPipe has a couple big trucks that need to be out there, refrigerated truck. Now, right before the board meeting here, Doug Van Gordon has been in contact with ProPipe, and we had it set up for next week. But evidently their boiler in their truck that heats the water, which goes in and expands the liner and cures it, blew up on them. So they're doing everything they can to expedite getting that fixed quickly. But as of today, it may not happen next week. They may still be able to get up here Tuesday or something like that, but it may be the following week. Oh, you did? Well, come on up. Update.
10 minutes ago, I talked to Steve Powers from ProPipe, and they have not heard from the repair shop repairing the pump. So right now we've set it up tentatively for them to mobilize August 1st, which is a Tuesday, and hopefully have the liner in on the 3rd and the 4th, Wednesday and Thursday of August.
You'll have to go through all your public outreach again and renotice.
Yeah,
Yes.
in fact, I came.
Thank you. So, as you can see, some of the things that we're dealing with, but eventually it will get done.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
And I think that's the last on the list. You can see past and future meetings. If there's nothing else, we can adjourn this meeting.
Sorry for the disruption.